Hello, everyone. I am so excited to be here talking about one of my favorite topics, and that is the future. We are going to have a terrific conversation today. Hopefully, I can get it all in before 2 o'clock. Today, I am working on my own. Our staff has been out since December 23rd, and they will not come back to the office until January 3rd. So that means I'm going to do my own introduction. I'm going to do my own slides, all those different things. Certainly, I do look kind of casual today because I did sneak off to do basketball. I am a basketball mom. So I had a game this morning. My kid had a game, and fortunately, we won, which is good. It's a good sign for today's webinar. But certainly, I'm Leah Smiley, president and founder of the Society for Diversity, which is a multi-million-dollar education technology firm that specializes in diversity and inclusion. I encourage you to connect with me on LinkedIn. And certainly, I have been featured in Entrepreneur, Forbes, Fortune, as well as USA Today. Um, I have been a guest on the Tavis Smiley Show multiple times on KBLA Radio. And I have worked with a team of great folks to develop the industry recognized certified diversity professional and certified diversity executive credentials, which are in all 50 US states and 30 other nations. All right, enough about me. Let's talk about our topic for today. We're going to talk about this whole idea of um, change and what it's going to look like for 2023 and your DEI efforts. Now, one of the things that I used to inform my presentation today was news articles. So I did like a search of all of the news articles from the last year and what some of the projections are for next year. And I use both traditional DEI sources as well as non-DEI sources. I just wanted to inform you all about my methodology. So the way that I'm going to talk about what to expect in 2023 may be a little different than what you may be used to, but of course, I'll bring it all in together. One of the things that kind of concerns me is the fact that we, and I'll say we as in all of us, appear to be in what I'll call new territory. And you may be wondering, what does that mean? It's a little discomforting for many respects because we as a whole have done all this DEI work and we have literally changed the world. And we're now in a place where no one else has been before. And one of the things that a lot of organizations are faced with is, where do we go from here? So I'm hoping that today's presentation will equip you with kind of like a guide to inform like what you do next, right? So I think it's not just us in the DEI industry that's feeling it. I think business leaders are feeling it. I think employees are feeling it. We are all in what I'll call one big bucket where we have done all these different things um, to bring attention to the need for change. And now we're in a place in the world where we've never been before. And I just want you all to think about that for a second, because a lot of organizational leaders have said, hey, let's go back to the past. Let's go back to 1950, right? Because they don't know what to do. They've never been here before and they don't know what to do. And it's up to us to put our clear heads on and kind of pave the way for what happens next, right? Since we're the ones who kind of got us here. So with that being said, let me get into my presentation. So I'm going to talk about a lot of interesting stuff. Again, I'm hoping that I can finish everything that is on my agenda for today. but certainly I don't have a whole lot of slides just because I intend to do a whole lot of talking. All right, so we're going to talk about some trends, and we're going to look at what those trends actually mean for your work. We're going to look at 2022 in review. I am going to ask you to also participate in a presentation. It won't be one of my presentations if you all don't participate. So I need you all to actually participate as we're going through this presentation. And then we're going to talk about trends and also the DEI checklist, some of the things that you'll need to do to prepare for 2023 and beyond. So if you all can share in the chat feature who you are and where you're checking in from, that would be great. One of the things that I think it's very, very important for us to keep in mind is that a lot of us didn't get into the field because get into this DEI field because it was a lucrative job, or because we wanted to jump into this field. Some of us were kind of pushed into this field, and certainly what happened is we just kind of began doing the work, and things kind of worked out for us. In my case, I got into this work because I wanted to have a different place for my children. I wanted them to grow up in an environment that was much different than perhaps what I grew up in and what some of you may have grown up in. And one of the things that I would like to really see in the future is them being able to, them and their friends, those who look like them and those who don't, their relatives, whoever it is, I would like to be able to see us make some substantive progress in this DEI space. As you all know, it's very, very important to Generation Z that DEI is at the forefront. So there have been a lot of top stories in 2022. We've heard about the Great Resignation. We've heard about quiet quitting, where people are in a job and they don't necessarily quit, but they just don't do the work. They're not as productive. We've heard about the great talent reshuffle, where folks are saying, you know what, I worked in finance industry for 20 years, and now I want to go into technology or marketing or education. So people are really pursuing their passions versus saying, hey, I'm going to work in this job simply because I'm getting paid. One of the other top things that we've seen in this diversity, equity, and inclusion space is the fact that a lot of organizations have been pushing back, backtracking, rolling back, DEI, backlash, all sorts of stuff. We have seen DEI at the forefront. And again, part of it is driven by the fact that some organizational leaders are uncomfortable with where we are now in this DEI space. And not just in the DEI space, but in terms of us heading down the direction where we have been in what we'll call an employee-centered environment, where employees have been calling the shots like, hey, I'm going to quit. If you don't like it, I'm quitting. And that is something that a lot of leaders have been saying, hey, we want to take back control, right? Because the people, they want to unionize. The employees, they're talking about, quitting. They want to have say on what their schedules are. Things are out of control. And we need the command and control type of leader to step back in. So a lot of folks are pushing back on diversity, right? Because they're saying, we don't know where this is heading. We've seen layoffs, and a lot of the gains that organizations have made over the last couple of years have been eliminated because of layoffs. We've seen budget cuts, not just impacting DEI, but also other departments and divisions. We've seen shifting priorities and new leadership that says, hey, you know what? my predecessor said DEI was important, but for me, DEI is not as important. This happened recently at Penn State University, where they made this whole commitment to build a student center for diverse students. They made this commitment to really engage and do more with DEI. And then all of a sudden, a new leader comes in and she says, wait a minute, someone else made this commitment, not me. So therefore, I'm not going to proceed with these plans. And people on the campus, they're upset. Faculty, staff, students. One of the things that we have seen across the board is that data has been showing little to no progress. So organizations pushing back and backtracking now is kind of perfect. It's the perfect storm because a lot of organizations have invested money in DEI over the last 2 years, 3 years almost since George Floyd's death, and few of those organizations have seen progress. In fact, we have even seen this year that Equal Pay Day has gotten pushed back, right? So all these companies are making this commitment to diversity and they're saying, hey, we're going to do all these wonderful things. And certainly very few of those organizations have made progress on any of those goals that they established. We've seen with Equal Pay Day where the Department of Labor said, you know what, for Black women, Equal Pay Day retreated from August 3rd to September 21st. It changed from September 18th to November 30th for American Indian women, and it moved back from October 21st to December 8th for Latina women. And certainly, this is all while there are laws being passed talking about equal pay, more state laws being passed talking about equal pay, more countries trying to do more to level the playing field. And we've also seen more companies trying to attack equal pay. And the data shows that there's little to no progress. That's huge. I'm going somewhere. Stick with me for a moment. We have also seen the tech bubble that burst. What does that mean? It means that we were heading down a path for a moment where people were saying, hey, we trust corporate CEOs more than we trust politicians, right? And we have recently seen, after the election, we saw Facebook take a hit in its reputation because of its role in election interference, but also because of its role in Brexit. We saw Twitter more recently take a hit with the change in ownership with Elon Musk and him just doing all the things that he wants to do. But we've also saw some smaller tech companies that have been very, very well funded, that have been getting venture capital dollars. They have been failing as well. We had a small company called Pollen. They were based out of the UK. They did events. They did custom events. And certainly they had a culture where it was rife with harassment. You saw speed dating, drinking on the job, and drugs a regular part of the workplace. You had Kitty Hawk, that was funded by Larry Page, who was a co-founder of Google. And Kitty Hawk was supposed to usher in the next generation of flying cars. And even they failed. We had the SBF arrests and the FTX bankruptcy on the crypto scene. So a lot of things have really sought to undermine this whole tech bubble that was ushering in the future, right? So one of the things that we is one of the things that we have here is just my kid coming home from the game, and she's making a lot of noise. Hopefully, she will pipe down. But certainly, one of the things working at home is awful sometimes. But one of the things that we have also seen um, with the tech bubble is that people were saying technology is the future, right? And certainly technology is the future. However, at the same time that the technology industry formed, we also had the foundation of this DEI industry, right? And they were formed to kind of set aside and usher in this new era. And isn't it ironic that both industries, tech and DEI, have come to a point where people are kind of like disappointed and they're like, okay, where do we go from here? Because we have had all of these things happen in DEI. We've had all these things happen during the technology, during this technology phase. And people are saying that technology and DEI are the future, but yet we're kind of disillusioned with where we are right now. Generation Z has been keeping the pressure on organizations and politicians. We see in Iran, people are protesting. We had Iranian women burning their hijabs. We've had, Gen Z playing a role in the US elections. We see Gen Z also expressing their frustrations with Brexit. And we saw protests in China, and China is a place where you would never think that you would see protests over COVID lockdown, right? Lockdowns. There was a time when people in China would just say, okay, whatever our leadership tells us to do, that's what we're going to do. But the protests were so big that folks had to say, oh, you know what? We're not going to be able to do the full lockdown like we wanted to do. And certainly that has had an impact. So Generation Z is turning the world upside down. Um, we've had more environmental concerns, flooding in places like Nigeria and the US. We've also had wildfires and other emergencies that have really not only influenced the way that organizations insure individuals and businesses, but also influencing the way that we kind of look at the world, right? So at any point, I remember on a couple of months ago, there was a trending social media topic that talked about how the government is controlling the weather. And certainly, one of those conspiracy theories said, oh, yeah, the government's in control and they're just trying to throw people off. Okay, right. But certainly, um, these environmental concerns that we're facing are not just having an impact on people's property, right, and on lives. It is also having an impact on wildlife and biodiversity as well. So everything from the plants to the animals have been impacted by these new environmental concerns. I remember seeing a forest a couple of weeks ago where all were like 1,000 trees over hundreds of acres had died. And this is something that has never been seen before. There are birds in the hundreds and thousands and fish dying in huge numbers. So all of these things are causing many, many concerns. And then there's this whole concept called the new globalization. What does that mean? Okay, so there was a guy who wrote an article uh, a couple of weeks ago. And he wrote the article for Forbes, and he talked about globalization's great reboot. So for years, we've had protests and these anti-globalists in every nation around the world, right? And one of the things that they have really protested traditionally in developed nations is that the leveling of the playing field, right? So with this leveling of the playing field, what I mean is that the developed nations had the middle class come to right here, and then the less developed nations, they had their middle class come up here, right? So in places such as China and India and Nigeria, all these different countries, Mexico, um, all these countries now have huge middle class populations, just like we have seen in developed nations around the world. But their middle class has kind of come here and the rest of the world. So as we saw a leveling of the global playing field, um, we have had a lot of pushback from people in developed nations who said, hey, wait, we're supposed to be the ones who are up here and everybody else is down here. And therefore, we don't like this whole leveling of the playing field. So one of the things that has happened is that the world's interconnectedness has been called into question when we saw the global pandemic upend the lives of millions of people through mobility restrictions, supply chain shortages, and geopolitical tensions. For instance, what's going on in Russia and Ukraine, to name a few of the things that have happened. The pandemic really accelerated the transformation of the new economy. And certainly the theme going forward for globalization are diversification and resilience. So a lot of organizations who operated on a global scale said, hey, we still need to operate on a global scale. However, one of the big things that we need to do is diversify. So it doesn't make sense for us to continue to ship all sorts of different things across water and have it sit in a port for weeks and months. And it doesn't make sense for us to have to wait on perhaps like when China had that lockdown and people didn't have toilet paper in the US. Yeah, that was bad. But certainly, one of the things that we have seen is people saying, "Hey, let's make it so that we start looking to other suppliers, right, that can help us meet our supply chain needs." And I'm heading somewhere. Just stay with me for a minute. So this new globalization again, is challenging where we are because as I started this presentation, I talked about us being in new territory, someplace where we have not been before. And for a lot of organizations, they're going to have to rethink how they have done things in order to prepare for the future. And again, this whole diversity of thought is something that is going to be very, very important for a lot of these organizations, not just having representation, but you have to be able to include and you have to be able to include those individuals who are diverse and also make it so that you utilize them to the fullest extent. And I'm going to talk more about that. But what else happened? Use the chat feature to share some of the things that you remember from 2022. So I talked in general about a lot of different things, but what are some things that you remember from this last year? Of course, the Queen died. You saw Meghan Markle and Harry get back into the media, and that has been a big thing. We've seen rappers, a lot of rappers die this year. Takeoff was a big one. Generation Z was very, very upset about that. Abortion was rolled back in the United States. What else happened that was memorable to you? What else? Greta said continuation of people going to work for themselves. Mary said continued political vitriol. Deborah said more hybrid and remote work. Yep, I'm going to head on to all those different things. All right, so let's start talking about the trends. One big trend is this uh, rollback, I'll say, that we're seeing with the business case and diversity. Again, we have a whole lot of folks who are saying, you know what, we are in new territory. And one of the things that we see as we're looking at the economy and we're talking about recession, um, we see that a lot of companies are rolling back their DEI, they're dropping their commitments, they're going backwards, right? And that makes us uncomfortable. So maybe what we ought to do is just be proactive and disconnect DEI from the business case. Um, and I will caution against that. Here's why. You need to have a business justification for doing DEI. Again, we're a non-revenue generating unit. So it's almost like we have some people in this field who are trying to be proactive. It's like when you have a partner and the relationship is coming to an end and you know it and they know it, and you're like, okay, you know what? I'm going to break up with them before they break up with me. And and that's kind of what we're seeing now when we have people saying, hey, let's disconnect the business case from DEI. We have some people, thought leaders in the DEI space, who are like, you know what, we don't want the business case to be transactional, to be something that takes advantage of other people. We want this to really make sense from a personal perspective. Yeah, that's all good. But I am a woman and I'm a person of color and I am a Gen Z or a Gen Xer, right? So I have multiple dimensions of diversity. And even in the Society for Diversity, there is a business case for virtually everything that we do. Um, there was another a company that contacted us a couple of weeks ago, and they worked in the medical sciences field. And one of the things that they said is, we are a diverse company, and we see an opportunity for us to take advantage of the opportunity for us to talk more and more about um, the correlation between uh, people of color and and the work that we're doing in the medical sciences field, because we don't have enough of those conversations going on, and certainly because of that, we want to get certified. And again, it's a diverse owned organization, but the business case for them is to do a better job of connecting their work to the needs of Black and brown and white and tan and all the different populations that exist, right? So they're looking at it like, we could use this to help our organization to better meet the needs of these populations, but at the same time, ensure that we are informed and we have insight into this process as we're doing so. And I say that because you need to have a business justification. And saying that we're going to disconnect the business justification from the personal connection is kind of, I'll say, um, incomplete. So you need both. You need to have the personal connection, and you also need to have the business connection, because what I value on a personal level may be different from what you value on a personal level. So if I'm just, if I'm a DEI leader and I'm just relying on the personal level, then I may not do what's right for the business because I am looking at what I value as a person. Do you all see where I'm going here? We have to keep in mind diversity means that different people value different things. And on a personal level, I am going to have a different set of values than you are. And what that means is that because I value things differently than you do, um, you may value, women and, things that deal with parents or things that deal with caregiving, but I may value things that pertain to men and things that pertain to perhaps different generational groups, right? All of the things are important, but as an individual, we can't just say we only want people to value what we value. That's not diversity. And this is why you got to have the business case too. Because when you have both, the leaders are going to make decisions that make sense for the business. So I don't want you all to jump on the ship with the folks that are saying, hey, let's get rid of the business case because we want to preempt people getting rid of us. No, that's not going to work. The better approach would be to show results, which we're going to talk about today. You got to show results, show results, show results, show results, and then you won't have to get rid of the business case, right? Yeah, you want to get rid of the business part of it because you don't have any results. But certainly, you cannot build DEI that is sustainable just depending on the personal values of your leadership team. Because just like I talked about a little bit earlier, when that leadership team changes, you may find yourself on a sinking ship. And that's why it has to be done for the business. It has to be a business justification. You need both. All right, let's talk about what to expect for next year. I like how you all added some more things in here. Deborah said continued health disparities. Mary said staffing shortages everywhere. Deborah said more opportunities for grants with a DEI focus, DEIJ focus. That's a great point. And I read, Deborah, that that grant makers are not going to have as many restrictions like they have in the past. So in the past, they kind of dictated what grant making is supposed to be and what it's going to look like and what you're supposed to do. And a lot of those grant makers realize, okay, well, if we're talking about DEIJ, then we're talking about our vision for these communities and not really looking at these communities' visions for themselves. So that's a big change that we're seeing in the field where people are seeking funding. But as we're looking at next year, one of the big things that we're going to see is there's going to be a lot of chaos for short-sighted organizations. So remember, I talked about us being in this new space, and a lot of folks not knowing what to do. So they're like, okay, let's go back to doing what we used to do, like 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. Yeah, that's going to cause chaos. We see it with the airlines now, right? So the airlines during the pandemic, they said, hey, you know what we're going to do? We're going to lay off workers and we're going to take money from the government to retain the workers, and we're going to put that money in our pockets, and then we're still going to lay off the workers, right? And now, and for the last year and a half, really, you have had airlines canceling flights because they don't have enough staff. They're like, okay, it's the weather. No, it's not the weather because other airlines are still flying. Um, it maybe it's the people that are being rude to us. No, it's not that. It's not that. I know what it is. It's I don't know. We don't want to tell you all that the reason why uh, your flight got canceled. And the reason why we have all of these delays is because we're short of staff, because we took a shortcut a couple of years ago and said, we're going to lay off staff. And now that same staff is not, we're not able to get that staff back. Because remember, when we laid off the staff, there was the great reshuffle. So folks who said, hey, we work in the airline industry and we've been doing so for the last 5 or 10 years, they actually started new careers in other areas and they're happy. So they said, we're not going back to the airlines. Forget that, right? So again, we have and again, those airlines are now not able to scale up when they need to, which is ultimately going to pave the way for disruption for air travel in the next coming years. So again, we will also see short-sighted organizations getting into lawsuits. They will, engage in behaviors and conduct. They're going to be like, okay, well, you know what? Let's get rid of our DEI team. Let's just scale this DEI team down. We're going to cut here, cut there, cut everywhere. Oops, now we got a lawsuit. And now we have all these things that we have to pay for again. So yeah, we're going to see lots more of that. We may even see a recession. And again, a lot of organizations, um, instead of saying, you know what, how do we make it so that we rethink what we're doing and perhaps upskill or reskill our staff to enter into new industries? Maybe we come up with new ideas for new products and services. No, we won't have that. Only the progressive, forward-thinking organizations are going to be there. Everybody else is going to be saying, hey, how can we get back to 1980? Can you give us directions? Okay, the next thing is going to be entrepreneurship reimagined. We saw this even before the pandemic, where there was an increase in what we called the gig economy. Now they call it the side hustle. And there are a lot more individuals who are engaging in the side hustle to make ends meet. They're like, you know what, instead of me working 2 and 3 and 4 jobs, I'm just going to do a side hustle. I can do it right online. And some of these side hustles are actually becoming major companies, which is, ta-da, ushering in a new group of entrepreneurs. And these new entrepreneurs are going to be diverse. They're going to be every age group. So most of the time when we think about entrepreneurship, we think about people who are young, like the old tech company founders that I talked about a little bit earlier. Those individuals that have been a part of founding, these tech companies that have led Silicon Valley and kind of been developing all over the world. We think about these young people like SBX, right? No, SBF. We think about people like Sam, these unicorns, right? But there has been data to show that the majority of successful businesses will be from Generation Xers and baby boomers. Go figure. So again, when we're talking about reimagining entrepreneurship, some of the individuals who are getting laid off are finding jobs fairly quickly, but then others are going to turn those side hustles into new companies. And certainly some of the older organizations that used to be number one that said, hey, we're going to lay off all of our workers just because we want our stock market price to go up. Um, those companies will probably stay small, and they will be replaced by this new group of entrepreneurs that will be incredibly diverse. It will present an opportunity for you to diversify your supply chain, but it will also present an opportunity for you to leverage partnerships for your organization. Um, the pandemic has accelerated um, the transformation of the economy. And one of the things that we have been seeing, and I talked about with the travel, is that um, travel will be appended along with work. So we have seen that there is going to be a continued reliance and expectation on hybrid work as well as work from home. But also, um, along with that expectation, you will have people saying, hey, we don't have to go into the office to stay connected to our coworkers. And some managers will have to adjust to having perhaps hybrid staff. So instead of saying, well, there's going to be more opportunities for people who come into the office, we ought to be able to say, hey, let's get these managers some new skills so that they can create an inclusive atmosphere for people who are in the office as hybrid workers or people who are mandatory frontline workers, and those who are work from home. We have to be able to manage and have the skills to manage all of those folks. Right? Global connections are also going to be redefined. So people are more comfortable connecting with folks online. And we have also seen that even some startups now are forming, and a lot of businesses are forming where they're like, hey, we make house visits. And certainly we have folks that are like, okay, you know what? I can have packages delivered to my house so I don't have to go to the mall anymore, even though going to the mall may sometimes be nice. Certainly, I can shop from anywhere in the world, right? And certainly you even have countries that are trying to lure people to their nation by saying, hey, you know what? You can, if you have the ability to work from home, you can come here and have like a permanent staycation. So we have travel being redefined where people are going and saying, hey, I'm going to go live in Costa Rica for like 4 months or 6 months. And then I'm going to go back to, my suburban home or wherever I go, wherever I'm going. But certainly we are seeing that happen. There's also going to be a greater expectation for a people first culture. We have transitioned to what we call the knowledge and experience economy. So the knowledge economy is a technology piece, right? But the experience portion is how do I feel after interacting with your organization? And is that experience that I've had with your organization or with you one that I feel comfortable enough to share with others, to either stop them from interacting with you or to encourage them to interact with you? So, this knowledge plus experience economy has resulted in a greater expectation for a people first culture where organizations are not saying, hey, you better get in here and work these hours that I tell you to work, but where companies are like, hey, what's going to work for your work life integration needs, right? And the expectation that managers are going to be nicer and kinder to people. Certainly, one of the things that has really drawn a lot of people to Twitter and Elon Musk is the fact that he has kind of taken, the 1980s, early 2000s approach to management. And he is saying things and doing things that some managers wish that they could do. Now, how this will all play out, it may not be as positive as people think, right? Because we're already seeing the impact on Tesla. We're seeing the impact on the Twitter brand, on the Elon Musk brand. Don't get me wrong, Elon Musk has millions of followers. But at the same time, there's also millions of folks who are anti Elon Musk. And certainly for a billionaire, having people boo you at a comedy show can be pretty unsettling, right? So certainly we are seeing the expectation that organizations change from promoting people because they can do their job well to actually promoting people because they are good team players and they can manage their teams, supervise their teams in a way that ensures maximum productivity. All right. So, what else? We're going to see more unpredictable weather patterns, an increased focus on sustainability and growth, being able to survive over the next 2 to 5 years, 10 years. We're going to see explosive demand for social and simple digital tools as well as artificial intelligence. And certainly, we have been seeing this where people are saying, hey, you know what? We're going to create a social media platform that will disrupt Twitter. We also have people looking for simple digital tools. For instance, a watch that is connected to a lot of different things and that can monitor your health. And you can look at, you can talk to people on the phone on your watch. You can monitor how many steps you're taking. You can also connect with your friends and see how your friends are exercising. Certainly, this little simple tool has a lot of different advantages. The same thing with some of the headphones that are coming out. And glasses now, they are smart glasses and all sorts of other simple digital tools. I even saw an article a couple of weeks ago that said that artificial intelligence and robots will begin making donuts and making some fast food items because of the lack of workers. So we're going to see that more and more. We're also going to see space redesigned. What does that mean, Leah? It means that in some urban areas, I've seen articles about them planting vegetables and fruit and all sorts of plants that are not susceptible to the weather. So um, they're doing indoor greenhouses and indoor facilities that in abandoned buildings that have been in inner cities, so that they can grow food and they can make it so that we're not as reliant on food that could be impacted by the weather or by pestilence. Um, Redesigned space also pertains to some of the malls. So we have seen malls closing because buying patterns have changed and people are saying, hey, you know what? I don't have to go to the mall on a regular basis. Even when you think about the recent Christmas holidays and how people were not out shopping in mass like they were. Now, there were some places that were crowded, but you think about Black Friday and in China, how they have the Alibaba Day, and certainly all of these things point to people being more comfortable getting packages on a regular basis because it feels like Christmas when you get packages in the mail, or it feels like Christmas for me. But certainly, what that means is also um, delivery trucks. Will have to be done a little bit differently. So one of the things, so they'll have to redesign spaces on these delivery trucks, like mail trucks, since the US Postal Service has been delivering more packages. One of the things that they have said that they want to do is create new vehicles that will accommodate more packages for delivery so that um, their individuals who are delivering the mail are not getting workers' comp injuries from lifting up these heavy boxes. So everything from our vehicles will be redesigned, from our electric vehicles to um, trucks and more, but also thinking about people working from home. So, as more individuals are working from home, there will be some corporations that choose not to renew space leases. And what will happen is those rental offices, those rented offices, office spaces, and everything like that will now need to be utilized in a different way. And we've already seen this happening in a lot of communities where people are saying, hey, what are we going to do with this big, warehouse here? Or what are we going to do with this big space? Even with the malls, people are trying to figure out, what are we going to do? So this is, yes, Deborah said, repurposing malls for a healthcare education space. Yes, these are big things here. Um, there will also be expectations for progressive non-traditional benefits. So, with us hiring and focusing on hiring more diverse people, those diverse people will have a variety of different needs that we haven't seen before in the workplace. So, we have been seeing expectations for bereavement care, strategic parental leave planning, mental health, wellness, and burnout checks, where the company is checking to see, you're working at home by yourself. We want to make sure that you're not burning out, right? Because we want to make sure that uh, you don't do the quiet quitting, right? Um, we even see people who are requesting menopause support, right? So I talked to my doctor and I'm like, hey, I don't know anything about this menopause thing. I've never heard previous generations talking about it. But now women are saying, hey, we need menopause support. Thank you, Deborah. Pet care. We're seeing expectations for pet care. So everybody doesn't have children. And some people are content with not having children ever. They're like, you know what? I have 2 dogs or 2 cats, and we're all happy. And certainly, this is something that is different as we have all of this diversity in the workplace. What else? One of the other things that we may see is in the United States, changes to affirmative action. But certainly we have an opportunity to uh, to get ahead of that so that people are not equating diversity with affirmative action. So if the Supreme Court says, hey, we're going to do away with affirmative action in education, we will already make it so that um, our employers are not saying, hey, we're going to do away with everything, right? I expect the Supreme Court to do away with affirmative action. Um, that is something that I expect. But certainly, we have the opportunity to make it so that affirmative action is sufficiently disconnected from diversity. Deborah noted time off with pay for volunteering or giving back, right? We do that now with our employees for the Society for Diversity. We actually If there are performance issues or anything like that, you gotta, as a part of your redirection, right? You have to volunteer, and you'll be paid to do it, but it's going to give you the time to practice your skills. But you can also volunteer if you don't have performance problems, right? You can volunteer and get back, and we want that to be a central part of our work and the way we work. Deborah also said more professional development that may not be earning college degrees. That is so good because there are more companies that are saying you don't need a college degree to work here anymore, right? So we're in such dire straits for employees. We want to have workers that don't have degrees. So again, as we're thinking about diversity recruiting, what is that going to mean for the way that we recruit? Right now, there may be a hiring freeze on recruiting, right? But certainly, once recruiting gets started again, what is it going to mean if you have your competitors that are not requiring college degrees? Right? How are you going to reach out to diverse communities if you're not going to college campuses? Right? So I want you all to think about many of these things. So as we talk about what's ahead for DEI, as I said, we want to plan for better outcomes. We're not always going to be in this whole recession area, or this whole talk about recession. Here's why. Some of the people who are uncomfortable with where we are right now, we've never been here before, we've never done this before. They're just thinking it must be because we're heading towards a recession. But all the economic indicators are not showing that we're in a full-blown recession. But the people who are nervous because they're like, we've never been here before. We have to be heading toward a recession. No, no, no. We may not be in a recession. It's just we're in new territory. And because we're in new territory, um, things are different and change is more of a constant. So therefore, regardless of what happens, we have to be able to plan for better outcomes. Um, Instead of us kind of haphazardly going about our DEI work, we want to make it so that we're being intentional about the goals that we're striving for. We're being intentional about developing new leaders. We're being intentional about growth and helping the organization to transform its policies. And we're setting those goals as a part of our plan to make it so that we are being intentional and strategic. The second thing we're going to have to do is define accountability. Again, as we're looking at uh, the environment and we're looking at Generation Z and their expectations, and we're looking at how management has changed, um, we will have to really start having conversations about accountability and what that means for our organization. What does it mean to be accountable for the environment? What does it mean to be accountable for just uh, the way that we promote managers and the fact that there may be managers who are, kind of making things bad for us in terms of lawsuits or in terms of contributing to turnover. What does it mean to be accountable and having those conversations and really making it so that we're even talking about accountability for the Office of DEI and making it so that, again, just as we have people talking about, oh yeah, let's do away with the business case, and having people to think through what that really means. Because again, if I value something different from you, then certainly um, uh, I'm not going to, as an executive, I may not decide that it's a good idea for us to support this particular group, right? Certainly, we also want to make it so that we're providing insight into Generation Z and the organizational culture. These are two areas that a lot of executives are very, very interested in. But certainly, you can't separate the organizational culture from DEI. So, over the last year, there has been a trend in HR where HR folks have been like, "Hey, we want to take back culture, right? We want culture to come under the DEI, under the HR space, and we want to do it independent of DEI." You can't do that. Culture, organizational culture, um, anything dealing with culture, organizational culture, people culture, whatever it is, it's all DEI related. And we have to be able to work together in order to get the best results. So we want to provide insight into those things and really learn more about the expectations of our employees, and what they and how their behaviors are changing and more. We want to use the data to show positive and negative changes. So again, I talked about how the equal pay data has been, showing that we've had white women moving closer to equal pay or pay parity, but then all the other women have been falling further behind. Again, if we had been watching the data, we would have seen that, right? And being able to say, okay, who is our default group? And if we're going to talk about our default group, perhaps if we're looking at women, talking about women who have children, women who fall into this certain category, or maybe we're talking about employees, if we're talking about able-bodied employees, we're talking about hetero employees, we're talking about whatever employees we're looking at. Let's make it so that we don't have huge disparities in terms of our efforts, right? If we're working with the LGBTQ community, let's make sure we don't have a huge disparity between trans and those who are LG or B, right? So we want to use the data to show positive change and paint the full picture. And that brings me to making sure that we're taking more of a holistic approach, and we're not just taking what I'll call the generalist approach. So a whole bunch of people in the last couple of years, a whole bunch of folks jumped into this field of diversity, and I'm going to be wrapping up now. Um, a whole bunch of folks jumped into this field of diversity because it was a new field and, seemingly new. But certainly, we want to make it so that we're not just taking a generalist approach, but we're looking at DEI from a holistic matter, a holistic perspective. And we're thinking about intersectionality in a whole bunch of other areas. We're also integrating our work with marketing and innovation or product development or customer service and finance and legal and all these different areas, and we can build collaborations. Finally, we want to make sure we're connecting DEI to growth and sustainability efforts. So, what are some of the most interesting parts of the conversation to you? And then how are you specifically going to prepare for 2023? So Deborah said, looking forward to more movement, moving forward in 2023. And certainly we want to just make it so that we're thinking about, doing our work differently, and that we are embracing the changes, but also setting the path for this new territory that's coming up. All right, so thank you everyone for joining today, and hopefully you got something interesting out of our conversation. Any questions or thoughts before we conclude?
One concern I have, and you mentioned it, was because we are in a new place. Leadership may be thinking now we can rest on our laurels and that DEI is not, as you mentioned, as critical as it was before because we are in a new place. I would say that's one of the major concerns I have going forward.
Yeah, that is a concern for all of us. And the way that we're going to get through that is with the data. So being able to pull that data to show that we're not there yet, we still have a ways to go, and really being able to get people motivated with that vision for inclusion and equity.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, Deborah said we will need to build supports within the organization and utilize that data. That's right. And that data is also going to be critical in us being able to show progress. All right, well, thank you everyone, and I hope that you all have a great day. Happy New Year.
You too.
Bye-bye.
You too. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.